Hey folks, it's your main man Sabado back again, back in action. Welcome back to the channel. If you've been here before and if this is your first time, welcome. This is a channel where we talk about my early retirement journey, and I have a little twist. I was a retired HR guy, so I'm able to not only give you information about why I retired and what helped me get there, but I also am able to give you some view behind the curtain, because a lot of times we think a lot of things are happening behind the curtain that are not happening in the format that we think it does, and it creates frustration for us. But today I want to talk about something that I think is a little bit more ground level, that I think may help many of you out there as you look at retiring earlier. And so, what I'd like to talk about today is really just budgeting. How do you budget? How did I budget? What were some of the key pillars that I had when I budgeted for my retirement? And the reason I started thinking about this topic is because as I talk to people about my channel and I talk to people about the topics that we discuss, sometimes I get the deer in the headlights look, and people think that's great. It's fantastic that you were able to do these things, but what exactly is it that you did? What perspectives did you have? What steps did you take? And so I want to spend a little bit of time today just talking about a few steps that I took that helped me get my habits around being in a place to save money, which then eventually led to me finding financial independence and retiring early. So I know that was a word salad, but on that note, it's all set up, and we'll go ahead and get into it. So as I mentioned earlier, I have about 5 ways that help me budget in such a way to get to early retirement. And I know that all of these may not happen for everybody, but the idea is if you know that these things exist, then you know to aim for them. And so I just want to lay those out for you. So the first one is I created a detailed budget. The first thing I wanted to understand was what's the variance to what it is that I need to make. And I had a boss once that used to always talk in terms of budget, actual, variance. What's the budget? How much can you afford to spend? What's the actual? How much did you actually spend? And what's the variance? And that's the difference between how much you budgeted to spend and how much you actually spent. And when you start to understand that delta, you start to really understand what's possible, because when you look at, for example, I look at my American Express statement and I look at how much money I spent on takeout orders last year. Well, if I needed to save some money, what's the first thing I would do? Instead of buying takeout or going to a restaurant, I'd maybe go and buy some stuff at the grocery store. But I couldn't do anything if I didn't know what it was. So what the budget actually does is it really helps you just set up the plan, understand where you're spending your money, and it gives you a starting point. It's not a place that's designed for you to look bad or feel bad about yourself or any of that. It's really just to understand, where do I sit, so that way I know what I could work from. Because sometimes, and how many of this happen, please let me know in the comments, but how many of us have put a solution in play to solve a particular problem just to find that it doesn't solve that problem? Well, that's what happens a lot with people saving money. So if you create a detailed budget, you know where your money's going, and then you can take a look at where it is that you want to cut. Number 2 is you've got to prioritize your savings. Most of the time, people that don't put money away because they don't think they can do it, because there's other things they want to do with that money. And so when a person says that, what they're saying is I understand that saving money is important, but it's a higher priority for me to do this. And in some cases it is. Sometimes it's about having the lights stay on. Sometimes it's about food and being able to feed your family. Sometimes it's about transportation to and from work and the ability to get gas. But in a lot of cases, it's not. The fact of the matter is, and ask yourself this question, because I can't hold you accountable to it, but you can hold yourself accountable to it. But how many times have you said, I don't have the money to do that? But then when you look at how you ended up spending that money, you end up spending money on some nonsense. You're out at the club, you're out buying drinks, you're out buying cigars, you're out hanging with your homies, doing whatever it is that you need to do. So all I'm going to say is prioritize your savings. If you want to save money, it doesn't mean you have to save $100. Doesn't mean you have to save $50. Doesn't mean you have to save $1,000. It just means that you put some money away whenever you have money. For me, what that did is it played out where about 15 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, I was really stressed out because I had these credit card bills. I didn't know how I was going to pay them, and I just didn't know what I was going to do. And it turned out that when I put together my budget, then I saw how much money I had coming in, realized that if I took some of the funds from this other stuff, this other nonsense over here, and I put it towards a credit card, then I'd have that paid off in 6 months. So about 4 months later, that credit card was paid off. And then I was able to start putting more money in savings. And so what ended up happening was over time, the amount of money that I was able to put in became more. But even more important than that is I built the habit of saving money. Even now, as a retired person, my wife and I get into conversations because we're thinking about how can we save money? How can we save money on taxes? What can we do to put this money here, there, everywhere? And we're in a place where our goals now are around consumption. It's important to us that we spend a particular amount so we don't end up with a bunch of money, as they say, left on the table. No pun intended. But we've gotten so used to being in that habit of saving that saving is now second nature to us. And I think once a person gets themselves into the habit of saving, you then start to find yourself in a place where money comes from places that you didn't even know. Or as I like to say, that if you put kindness towards money into the universe, then the universe will put kindness for money back into you. So take that for what it's worth, but you've got to prioritize your savings. The next one is debt. And there's no way we can talk about saving money without talking about debt. The easiest way for me to talk about debt is this way. When you hear the financial people, and I'm sure I'm not your first financial person or first YouTube retirement person, because I'm not a financial person. I never even played one on TV. But I'm not the first person that talked to you about the importance of minimizing debt. But here's what I don't think people understand, is that when you look at any of these retirement channels, they'll talk about minimizing debt, but they'll also talk about this thing called compound interest. The way compound interest works is that if you save money, you put money, let's say you put $100 into the bank and you're getting 50% returns. So then the first year you put in $100, you get a 50% return. That brings you $1.50 or $150, right? So now you have $150 because you made an additional 50 on top. So now the next time that gets compounded and you get that 50%, you're not going to get 50% of 100 again. You are now going to get 50% of that 150, which is now going to be 75. You see how that works? So if you had a 50% return on your investment, the first year you're at 150. The second year you're at 225 because you have $75 on top of that. And then if you took that and you cut that 225 in half, which is about 112.5, well then if you get 50% on top of that, it's even more. So my point being that it continues to go on itself. Well, the problem is that debt does the same thing in the opposite, because you have $100 and you get 30%, or let's say it's a 50% payment interest charge. Well, now you got to pay $50 on top of that. So instead of having that money, that $50 in your pocket, you now owe that. But the problem is that principal continues on and on and on. And if you take a look at your credit card statements, and I do apologize in advance because I like to keep it completely transparent. I haven't looked at my credit card statements in a long time because I don't use credit cards in the way that I used to. But the last time I looked at my credit card statement, it had on there how long it would take me if I paid the minimum balance every month in the number of years. And I think for me, it was like 20 something years. And so it didn't make sense for me to pay 20% more on my credit card for 20 years to end up paying almost 50% more, 100% more because of the interest that I'm paying on the principal. Didn't make sense to me. So I just paid it off. The point being, if you want to save money, you have to minimize your debt. If you want to have a net worth that's positive, it's your debts, it's your income and your assets minus your debts. So if you have $100,000 in the bank and you got a $200,000 car, guess what your net worth is? Your net worth is minus $100,000. So you want to keep those things in mind and really be thoughtful about it. Again, my goal isn't to have you come out and be perfect at all these things out of the gate, because none of these things are things that you can be perfect with outside of the gate. But what these these are things that as you start to think about them, they start to take on new life. It's just like anything that you think about a lot. When you start, you bumble around, you don't know exactly what you're doing, but as time goes on, you actually become pretty good at it. Saving money for me, I wasn't always good at saving money, but over time, I got pretty good at it. Managing my finances, I'm not the best at it, but over time, I got good at it. So my point is if you try any of these things, you get a little bit better, and they're really simple. And I'll recap them at the end, so that way you know what they are. The next one is invest wisely. Right now we're going through, I think many of us know, we're going through a fairly volatile market cycle. And when I say volatile, that means stocks are going up, stocks are going down, but for the most part, they're trending downwards for the last year, or for this calendar year. A lot of people are saying, well, I'm going to take my money out of the stock market. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, here's the reality of it, folks. The market is down X number of percent. Granted, you're right. But the companies that make up the markets are still fundamentally sound. So they're still selling products, they're still developing products, they're still doing all the things they were doing. And so there are external factors to the market that are impacting the broader market. So no matter where you invest, except for a couple of unicorn stocks, you're going to lose that money. So that's why I always say it's important to minimize that risk. One, by going into a mutual fund, but number two, by setting up investment windows that are far enough out for you to realize the gains. So, for example, if you look at what's happened since 2020, we had COVID, the markets crashed. The markets have been up almost 40% since that crash. The fact of the matter is that the markets will recover over time. And if the markets don't recover, then we have a bigger issue than any of us are going to be talking about, because then you're looking at the mega companies, the Dow Chemicals, the DHLs, the Googles, the Metas, the major companies in the organization are all going down. And that means it's probably going to be some type of government bailout anyway, which is going to be a situation that's about as catastrophic as what we had in 2008. And so there's nothing that can help you in that situation. So when I say invest wisely, I'm not going to tell you which stocks or which mutual funds or any of that, but focus on real things, big things, things that have been around for a while. So if you're going to focus on going into mutual funds, go into large cap mutual funds, because no matter how bad the economy gets, Goodyear is still making tires. Michelin is still making tires. Google is still making money off of advertising, selling your data to everybody around the world. Everybody's, but if you try to go for those quick ones, that's where people get lost. And there's this idea, and let me know if you do this, but of day trading. Day trading is like gambling at the casino. There's people that have perfected gambling and they become professional gamblers, but guess what? They still lose too. The difference is they usually have somebody else's money that's helping them fund their gambling. If you're taking your money and you're gambling with your money in a situation that you don't necessarily understand front to back, I just think it's ludicrous. If that's what you want to do you, boo. But it's not about me. I ain't got nothing but love for you, honey. But anyway, and then the last thing I'll mention, and I know, and I get the sense sometimes that these retirement conversations and channels can be a bit insulting, because if some of these things were as easy as people said, then everybody would do it. And I recognize that not everybody can do it. So before you bash me in the comments, understand, I recognize not everybody can do it. But if you have these things in your mind, these are what I call Sabado's money mindset. If you have these things in your mind, what they'll do is they'll help you make decisions. And it's not at the point where you have the outcome, it's the point where you make the decision, where the rubber hits the road. And so this is designed, this whole channel, this whole video is designed to give you some perspective as you're making certain key decisions, because it's my hope that at some point you say, oh yeah, this guy Sabado said this. Maybe I should check that out, because what I say may not be right for your situation, but at least it gets you asking that question. Okay, this is what a mutual fund is. Oh, okay, I'm going to do an annuity, fine. But the last one is living below your means. It's easier said than done, and I've had people say to me that, but if I live below my means, then I wouldn't be able to eat. If I live below my means, then I wouldn't have the car that I have. If I lived below my means, then I would be I wouldn't have my apartment, whatever the case is. So I'm not telling you to do that. If you think I'm asking you to do that, then you're sadly mistaken. What I'm saying is I think if we all go back and look at our lives and we look at what we do on a daily basis and where we spend money and the habits we have and the things that we invest our time in, because time is also an investment. And when you retire, I'm going to tell you this now, and you're not going to believe me until I tell you, but you'll realize that your most valuable resource is your time and how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. Because once you get past 50, the reality is most of your years are probably behind you and not in front of you. And so it's really important to understand, that time. But if you have the ability to cut back on things that take away from your ability to save, then consider cutting back on those things. You don't have to not go to the movies, but if you go to the movies 5 times, maybe try going 3 times and then taking an extra $20 and using it. Or if nothing else, try to get yourself to a net zero where you have just as many debts as you have income. So that way, at least you're at zero, because what you don't want to do is, I think E40 once said, don't buy an $80,000 car before you buy a house. Well, you don't want to do that, because now the car is going to be gone. And eventually the place that you're going to live is going to cost you more money. So it's just something, again, to think about as you start making these decisions and putting things in your head to help you get to the point where you're making the decision that you're going to be happy with down the road. So I want to go back through the 5 things that I talked about. The first one is creating a detailed budget. You don't know where you are unless you're able to count where you are and add up those dollars and cents and say, this is what I'm spending here, this is what I'm spending there. Otherwise, you're kind of shooting into the wind. Number 2, prioritize your savings. Savings are clutch, and you have to, once you put a priority behind it, then you make it happen. Think of it this way: the most important investment that most people make is having kids. But guess what? Most of us out there, I come from the generation where people were still having kids by accident. I know now everybody's trying, so I don't want to disrespect any of the people that are trying, but the reality is a lot of us have kids, don't know how much it is, and then realize, well, the kids are a priority, so we're going to focus everything around that. Well, why is our savings any different? Savings is critically important, so what we're going to do is we're just going to circle everything around that. Not to the detriment of everything, but just giving it the credit it deserves. Number 3, minimizing debt. Debt is the number one killer of savings plans around the world. Now, I'm being a bit hyperbolic because I don't know that to be a fact, but I will tell you that debt is a killer of your budget, because you're paying money, and now think about this, you're paying money to have money that you owe for something that you bought before. So unless it's something that's deductible on your taxes, like if you have a home, a second home, and I know in some states and certain circumstances, RVs, and so if it's giving you a tax benefit or there's some other reason for you to take on that debt, then that's good debt. But when you start looking at credit card debt, there's no reason to have credit card debt unless it was a last ditch effort to pay for food for yourself and your family. But if you do, then pay it off at the end of the month. I pay my credit card off at the end of every month because I don't want to pay somebody for me owing them money. It's like the banks give you interest because they're holding your money and they're using your money and they're investing it. Well, we're not doing that. We're just holding on to it and we're paying more money because they allowed us to hold that money. It's almost like a loan shark situation. So just get out of that as much as you can so that way you are managing control of your own life, because that's what it comes down to. Number 4, investing wisely. And I know a lot of when I talk about investing, we're talking about financial investing, but I'm just going to put this in here. Invest your time wisely. Put yourself around people that are going to help you grow. People are either helping you grow or they're holding you back. There's no in between. We like to think there's an in between because jettisoning people off of our ship is quite frankly, it's painful. But sometimes you have to jettison people. Sometimes people have to go. Are you investing? If you don't feel good about the time that you're spending, then you have to identify that and figure out, is there a way to make a move? So I know a lot of us out there looking at our jobs saying, I don't like my job, I don't have a choice. Well, but by you staying at that job is a calculated move. And so imagine how much more success you would have if you calculated out all of your time over the course of your life and were intentional about how you do everything. And again, I know that's hard for some people, but that's what I did. And that's part of why some of the dynamics that exist in my life exists, but also part of the reason I was able to find financial independence and retire at 51. And then the last one, and I don't want to underestimate this because it's not last in terms of importance, but it's just happens to be on the list, the number 5 on the list, which is live below your means. Try to figure out, once you do your budget, once you manage your debt, once you do all those things, try to figure out, how do I live below my means? Is there a way that I can cut something? One of the things that I cut recently, because I'm doing this almost every month, is I like to play video games. So I have my PlayStation 5 and I have my PlayStation Network subscription. Sucker was costing me $80 a year. So what I had to figure out was, I'm paying $80 a year. What do I get for that $80 a year? So I get a game. I get 3 games, free games every month. Now, how many of those games do I play? Maybe 1 or 2. Games cost about $60, $70. So then as I get to the time where it's starting to renew, I start to think, over the last year, did I use the $79 in free games? If the answer is no, then I cancel it. If the answer is yes, then I've gotten the value out of it. But at the end of the day, I know that just paying $80 a month willy-nilly can have an impact to the budget. And then some of the software that I'm using with YouTube, some of you that have watched some of my earlier channels see how some of the software have changed, because some of the software was more expensive. I wasn't getting the bang for my buck, and I went for where I had to get bang for my buck. None of this is about living within your means, but if you're intentional about your expenses, then you're going to find yourself being thoughtful about whether or not you can afford something in the first place, which is really what it all comes down to. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and cut this one off. I just wanted to give you one that was, really to the point and gave you some news that you could use. But I would ask that if you like this channel, if you find any of the information helpful, consider subscribing. I'm always looking for subscribers. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not trying to sell you anything. It's not my bag. I had thought about doing some coaching stuff, but I haven't been asked for it. So if people ask me for it, then I'll do it. I'm getting to the point where I might be able to add subscription models and stuff. But the one thing I think is important to understand is that this isn't my full-time job. I'm retired. I'm doing this just as a way to help. So I'm trying to keep this as organic and just as natural as possible. So on that note, it's just going to be a matter of, how do I get the information to you in the most effective way possible? So if there's things that you'd like to have discussed or brought forward on the channel, let me know. I'll talk about them. I'll research them, or I'll give you my opinion. And I never expect that everybody's going to be able to retire early, but I do expect everybody to live their best life. So, and that's what you're always going to get from your main man, Sabado. So on that note, have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon.